It's the Security Weekly News. It's episode 422. Welcome to the week of 15 October 2024. We got AI steganography, uBlock, PPTP, Log4J rises from the grave, command jacking rises from the grave, Windows 10, Principal Skinner's feet, Josh Marpet, and more on the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365.25 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. All right, from exile on the island of Elba, we're back, and it's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and welcome to the show. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment on your favorite platform, for the children. Come on. All right. Microsoft deprecated the point-to-point tunneling protocol, which we all know as PPTP, and the Layer 2 tunneling protocol, which we all know as L2TP. Yeah, they just did that. Like, wow, I thought those things had been put in the grave 20 years ago, but they haven't. But they did say they are deprecating them in future versions of Windows Server. So I guess if you want to keep using these ancient, horrible, insecure protocols, you can. But they recommended that admins switch to something else with better security. Pretty good advice, kind of vague, but okay. Both of these protocols are more than 20 years old, and they've been used to allow remote access to corporate networks and Windows servers since they started allowing such things. Remember Back Orifice? I do. Back Orifice was a play on words of a Microsoft product called Back Office, but Back Office, which allowed you to manage servers way back in the day, didn't allow you to do that remotely. So Back Orifice was there to save the day, only, it was a rat. Yeah, and that rat was made by Cult of the Dead Cow. Yeah, those were the days, let me tell you. But anyway, PPTP is vulnerable to offline brute force attacks. You can literally capture the packet streams and get the auth hashes and crack them. And L2TP doesn't even have encryption. I mean, that's how old these things are. But Microsoft's advice is move to secure socket tunneling protocol, which is called SSTP. And probably you're using it already, but maybe you're not. They also recommend, of course, use IKE v2, which is Internet Key Exchange version 2. Look, it's always a good time to evaluate connectivity. Like, what are we using? What protocols are we using? Why are we using them? How secure are they, and so forth. But it is a really good time to start finding out if you are using some of these ancient protocols and start figuring out how to get rid of them if they're built into some kind of a custom thing that you have running, because all of a sudden they may go away and then you won't be able to do those things anymore. And it's always bad when you have to fix up stuff on the fly at the last minute. I've had many of those kind of jobs where somebody's like, oh my God, it quit working. We have to rewrite all this code. And then the next thing you know, you have really, really bad code. If you don't believe me about all that, just refer to the pandemic for every app built during that time frame. All right, Google issued a warning that uBlock Origin ad blocker, a very popular ad blocker extension, but they said other extensions as well will soon be blocked because they are using the deprecated Manifest v2. Speaking of deprecation, Manifest v2 is an extension, and it is deprecated at this point, and they're saying it's soon not going to work anymore at all, which is what deprecated means, right? But they said that Manifest v2 has security flaws and privacy issues. Now, if you do have uBlock running, it may be popping up messages too at this point with warnings that look very suspicious. The warnings they put up in the article had that sort of phishing feel to them. They're not, but they felt that way. One of them basically advised the user to switch to uBlock or uBlock Original Lite or other ad blockers. Which that would make me suspicious right there if something popped up and said, your ad blocker may not work anymore. Please click here to get a new ad blocker. Like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. But you may want to warn people about the warnings even. We tell you a cajillion times not to click links, but here we go. You need to learn more. Click here. Yeah, and install a different ad blocker. Right. Anyway, the makers of uBlock don't like this. And they said that the light version may well not meet your needs, that it was a scaled down version. And apparently the Manifest v3, which is what Google wants you to use, is very difficult to adapt a lot of this stuff and has limited ability of ad blocker features. Now, my cynical side said immediately, I wonder if Manifest v3 lets them not block certain ads or something. I was being cynical there. I don't have any evidence of that. But it will be possible to continue to use Manifest v2 until July of 2025. uBlock and Manifest v2 will continue to work on other browsers like Firefox or Brave or some of those. And the uBlock Origin dev and maintainer Raymond Hill said there was nothing insecure about uBlock Origin, but rather it was just the warning about Manifest v2 being disabled that was causing all the hoopla. So basically it's Google deciding they don't want to use something. I'm not going to say it's good or bad. And that means their product will no longer work the way it was intended because it uses that thing. So we've all seen that before. Remember Log4J? Pepperidge Farms remembers. Yeah, well, so do I. About 3 years ago, quite a while ago, really, in internet terms, Log4Shell was a 0 day that was uncovered in Log4J. And if you don't remember what Log4J is, it's an open source logging framework that is embedded in a lot of things, including Apache web servers. Yeah, and of course, Apache web servers are running just about everything on the planet. It was an example of supply chain type issue in the Java framework, and that this 0 day could allow arbitrary code execution. And it had been sitting around in there since about 2013 when somebody figured it out, or maybe people knew about it all along and they just didn't say anything. Now, on a scale of 1 to very bad, it was very bad. So that was 2021. So let's roll this forward to today. Sonatype released a new research report that showed 13% of active Log4j installations were still running vulnerable versions. So despite all the press, me talking about it for a year, everybody else talking about it for a month, Paul's Security Weekly talking about it, everybody talking about it, every article you saw for months was about this problem. Some of you are still running vulnerable versions of this stuff. There are still vulnerable versions available for download because people want to download old versions because the new versions won't work. So it's pretty disappointing to me. I mean, let's get that number down to 0, okay? I mean, do you really want to get got by an elderly 0 day with, let's call it an nth day vulnerability? It's not a 1 day vulnerability. It's an nth day. It's so old and it's patched. It's just kind of embarrassing. And when you get got by that, that's when heads roll, right? I mean, because nobody in the C-suite may understand this until they do. And you have to tell them, yeah, we got by this. And they go, oh, so that's something new. And you're like, oh, no, it's like a 3-year-old vulnerability. We didn't have time to patch it. Yeah, that kind of thing. You know how that goes. Command jacking. Speaking of elderly things, I had not heard that term in a while. I really didn't. I mean, I don't know if you remember these kind of things, but these were some of the original, like practical joke almost command jacking attacks, where you could mess with the path on the system. I mean, people did this on the mainframe. I remember people doing this way back on the mainframe days when I was an undergrad. But I mean, say you write like a little fun piece of code that makes a pop-up box that says you're being hacked. Your hard drive is being wiped as we speak. You compile that up into a file called calc.exe and put it in a directory called foo. Now, if foo is on the path variable, the environment variable path, before C:\Windows\system32, it would run calc.exe instead of the actual calc.exe file. Yeah, it's just, people did this for pranks, but they also did it for malicious reasons too. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we saw in high school attacks and middle school attacks, and mostly it was just people being annoying. But it can also be very, very dangerous because if somebody runs that executable thinking they're running a calculator, it's a problem. So the latest example of this is a way to embed things into supply chains by impersonating third-party tools. and using system commands to target various stages of the development process. So what they've been doing is targeting things like PyPal, NPM, Rust crates, and all those kind of things to put up products that work, but also have these kind of path statements in them. So if you installed a package, it could shift that path to read something earlier in the path, and they can actually supplant that with another installed directory. So basically, like calc.exe, they could put up another directory that supersedes it and then runs whatever the hell they want to run. And that would be, as we say in the business, very bad. So the advice on this is you should be auditing your path orders. And oh boy, that's a tall order. I've done that. Running path audits is a nightmare, but it's something you probably need to do. And you need to be sure that only trusted directories are being used for, these kind of pulls. And we had to do this in a couple of high schools because the kids just kept, superseding this, and I could not get them to restrict access to that path variable. They just didn't want to do it. But, you can also hard code directories that contain common commands, and that sort of stuff. Package signing is a good idea. And of course, ensuring least privilege is enforced. It's really scary, but it did work really well for practical jokes and Easter eggs. That was pretty fun. We changed the calc one once in a lab because the teacher said their math students were cheating on tests, and the class was being taught in a computer lab. So I just changed it. I changed the path so that if they clicked on calc.exe, it popped up a little window that said naughty, naughty, and they couldn't. I figured anybody who could get around that didn't matter anyway. You could just study for your math test, really. Anyway, an interesting proposal from the White House in the United States said that a suggested solution to the constant escalation of ransomware was to eliminate insurance payments for cyber extortion by banning them. Interesting. I mean, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. Criminals know what the policies pay. They conveniently set the ransoms to the policy amount. They find out if you have cyber insurance, and then they hit you because you didn't patch Log4J, or Bob down in accounting clicked that link that said, "Want to see an elephant? Click here." And well, your cyber policy just happens to cover the amount that's being asked for, so just pay up. Lather, rinse, repeat. Why improve our security posture when we can just let our insurance cover it? Yeah, I mean, and understand this is not an attempt to belittle the entire insurance industry or imply that, or a reflection of what your insurance or your ransomware attacks may be like. So you should read your policy to determine what your liability is. And not all criminals are in on the scheme, so they may still be doing stuff like asking Rob's car wash for $100 million, dollars in crypto or something silly. I had a guy call me about one of those. He was like, they're asking for like $5 million. He was like, we've never made, we make like $100,000 a year. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. So I said, negotiate, but at least I get the idea. And the FBI has been telling us for years not to pay ransoms, right? Because they may not give you the keys. They may re-ransomware you immediately after giving you the keys. I mean, it's just not a good idea. And it encourages them. When criminals make money off doing something that's very hard to prosecute, they keep doing it. So, and of course, extortion has evolved beyond the sort of, do you have backup state? It's sad that we had to preach about that so long, but now it's about releasing your naughty secrets, and, having a good backups and recovery is just a part of the process. So the argument is free money is escalating the crime. I don't know if I totally agree with this, but I kind of get why it was said. If you do it like auto insurance, if you have my brother build you some crazy car that's really dangerous and the insurer just says, okay, yeah, sure, here's your policy. And, and when you crash it, they give you money. Well, you'll probably never learn. On the other hand, if the insurers enforced security hygiene and refuse to insure people who don't have any, like when you go to the insurance company, go, I got 15 DUIs last year, they won't probably insure you. So maybe if they started really getting serious about enforcing cyber hygiene, it would help. But I just really hate the idea that criminals can just keep on making a fortune by doing this, and insurers just pay them off and the cycle repeats. So I at least see why the government is thinking about this stuff and why I should be in a different business. Well, it's probably worth noting that 1 year yesterday marks the end of support for Windows 10. Now, when Windows started the whole year ending thing, like Windows 98 or whatever, and of course they got kind of off track at some point, but there may still be some security updates for an additional fee after next October 14th. But it's a kind of a grim day if you're using Windows 10. I think the notable thing that comes alongside this was that Microsoft with Windows 11 put very specific hardware requirements in place. If you remember when that happened and they started sending you a notice, go check to see if your system will support Windows 11. And not many did. So, like I have a bunch of laptops that have Windows 10 on them that can't be upgraded to Windows 11. Although I have a laptop somewhere that's got Windows 98 on it. So, I'm not going to say anything, but that hardware requirement was put in place and it meant you could not upgrade. So the plan, at least according to the cynics in this article, was that due to these requirements, Windows 10 users would run to Microsoft's, recommended suppliers and buy all new hardware because, they couldn't run Windows 11. But mostly they didn't, because when I first saw Windows 11, I was like, is this really any different than Windows 10? It didn't really seem to offer very much to get me to replace a whole laptop. And when you start thinking about replacing 36,000 laptops and 15,000 desktops in the company, it's not just something you pick up the phone and call Gateway and say, Mark, Doug, send me 36,000 of your hottest laptops and throw in 11. No, make it 12,000 desktops with big monitors, really big monitors. We'll golf on Tuesday, right? I mean, I used Gateway because they don't exist anymore. But yeah, anyway, I mean, and of course that doesn't happen in most companies, and it certainly doesn't happen when I've tried to do it, and I was like, yeah, just replace all your hardware. Yeah, that's when you get that look, right? But now I think you may have to actually think about this. The CEO may have to forgo buying a new yacht next year because you may have to upgrade a bunch of hardware because Windows 10 is no longer going to have security updates. But, I don't know. Or maybe you'll skip Windows 11 and wait for Windows 12 or Windows 13 or Windows 56 or Windows 25 or whatever comes out next. But you'll probably have to buy new hardware then, or you'll be running out of support software, which is really, really problematic. And of course, they can hit you up for fees for, providing security updates for flaws in their software, which sounds kind of criminal to me. Or you could run Linux, I guess. But, that's not for everyone. Well, according to a report from Microsoft, speaking of Microsoft, attackers are increasingly targeting, wait for it, among other things, K-12 and higher ed institutions. I can't imagine why. Maybe it's because they have access to your permanent record. That permanent record that they have that says you were smoking in the gym when you were in the 8th grade? Yeah, that one. Or your grades, your classes, your social security number, your hat size. Oh, you remember that night at the junior prom and the shopping cart? Yeah, that's in there too. Universities have your whole history as well. They also have your financial information, your parents' financial information, your great-grandparents' financial information, your credit score, and who knows what else, because, it's university. So remember that night in Clement Hall when you drank all that Mickey's beer and decided you could climb the outside of the building to the roof? Yeah, neither do I. But we won't bother going out to that vacant lot down there anytime soon. But your permanent record remembers. And K-12 and universities don't usually have much in the way of budgets for cyber either. So their whole security operations run by a guy in the English department in his spare time because he told someone he had a Sinclair computer at home and the password on the main system is Go Panthers. Not to mention when they get hit, they're under a lot of pressure to fix it by parents and authorities who are all going, who's to blame? My child's not in school today. We got a day off when the high school gym exploded. Really, I'm not even making that up. It exploded when I was like, a little kid. But now Principal Skinner doesn't want to get those pictures of his feet released. Yeah, that kind of stuff. So the report said that the education sector is currently dealing with an average of 2,507 attempted attacks per week. Universities were particularly vulnerable. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Have you ever tried to tell faculty to do something? It's like telling your cats to go lay down, right? You can't use the password Gandalf, okay? Really? I'll just use it more. I've just changed all my passwords to Gandalf. So there. That'll show you. Academic freedom. Yeah. So be careful out there. Well, Josh is the only guy I know who can change a diaper, kill and roast a wild boar, write a paper on spooky quantum crypto, and teach a class on PKI all in the same hour. So bow before Zod, pathetic humans. Hi, Josh.
It's not every hour. That's like, in a week, man. Come on, in a week, okay? But it's interesting, your last story about universities. It's even worse because things like, I'm just going to expand on that really quickly. Federal tax information is now listed as controlled unclassified information, according to the IRS. So now you've got universities that now have to meet CMMC, Like it's getting very crazy out there for security and compliance for all EDUs. So there's a lot of issues going on.
And they're not
But
ready
anyway.
for it. I mean,
Oh,
not
God,
all of
not
them,
even
but
close.
I mean, they don't have the budget. And when they go in and go, we need to hire all these people, and they're like, oh, we've been staffing the whole, like, I remember I consulted for one, and it was like their whole IT department was literally undergraduate students.
Oh, well, that's fine. They're perfect, aren't they? They all like 12 years old. They know what to do because they're 12 and they grew up with this stuff.
They were doing okay, but I mean, they were like part-time, and they didn't, they were being paid, under minimum wage because they were considered work study students or something like that. And and that school just didn't even have, they had like one person who was assigned to that. And I talked to a high school where I wasn't even making that thing up about the English teacher. There was literally a high school where they were having problems. And this English teacher had been assigned to be in charge of their Cisco equipment that they got with a grant, but they did not, of course, get any money from the state to hire a Cisco administrator or a security person. So this one poor teacher who got saddled with this was trying to manage the entire infrastructure of the school district in her, after hours time. She didn't even get a course release for it. They did let her out of bus duty, she said, so she didn't have to go sit at 5 a.m. in the cafeteria for the buses. But she was, like, I don't even know what to do here. I don't even know how this stuff works. They came and installed it, and it just sits here, and now there's problems. And I'm like, yeah, we dumped the logs. I was like, yeah, this is bad, folks.
It's nothing like part-time, underpaid undergraduates with no professionalism. Not their fault. They're kids, to make a really quality IT experience, right?
And I mean, schools have made a lot of progress, in the last 10, 15 years. I've seen huge improvements, but there's a long way to go compared to, say, like big enterprise corporate kind of stuff. So
Absolutely. So anyway, let's get to my story. So I've got a story that at first glance is about a terrorist act. And that was, or an anti-terrorist act, rather, which was when Israel allegedly put explosives into a whole batch of pagers for Hezbollah. Okay. And it turns out that it's actually very easy to do. So Bunny Huang, who's done quite a lot of technology journalism, realized that Bunny actually did a battery for a custom project that Bunny did. So it costs between $10,000 and $50,000 to build your own lithium ion batteries, and putting a sheet of PETN or something like that in there, it might even escape any kind of detection, even X-raying the devices. And apparently Hezbollah X-rayed some of the devices, but because it's a plasticized sheet that's a spacer inside the battery, it looks just like the rest of the battery. What are you going to do? And the question here was not, has this been done? It's been done. Could it be done? Yes, of course it could be done. It's been done. But will this be done? And what does that mean for the supply chain security of all of our devices? Look, everything, I bet with anybody that's watching this show, and anybody as a host or producer of this show could look around, there's probably 3 or 4 batteries on their desk, in their cell phone, in their, whatever, right now. Okay, between the toys, the cell phone, the wireless mouse, etc. There's batteries in about everything we use. And I know I've got stacks of batteries for replacements in the house. I don't have to wait for Amazon to deliver or for me to run down to the CVS. And the problem is that it's becoming so trivial to manufacture these batteries. Does that mean that we need to worry about the supply chain of not just the laptop that Gateway didn't deliver to your house last week, but the supply chain of the battery inside the laptop? Does this mean that we need hardware bill of materials? We need trusted routes for all of these items, for all these devices, that we really need to worry and think about the supply chain of everything we do, not just in software. Software bill of materials is a very common topic in the last few weeks and months and years, but also the hardware, the firmware, the microcode, all the different pieces. And the answer is yeah, because look, let's examine this just a little bit closer, just for 2 seconds. Every one of the batteries in the pagers has a printed circuit board inside of it for battery control. Lithium-ion batteries need heat control, heat sensing, heat monitoring. If they get too hot, they start filling with hydrogen gas. That's when batteries expand, and then eventually they pop and they turn into bombs, no matter whether you've got it packed with explosives or not. So there's a circuit board in there. There's firmware on that circuit board. So we've got a firmware on the circuit board in the battery inside the laptop that has multiple circuit boards with firmwares on each one of those, with more components that could be interesting things done to them. And at the end of the day, we've got multiple levels of software bill of materials, firmware bill of materials, hardware bill of materials that are actually necessary for us to ensure that we have safe products for our people, our organizations, and everybody to use. What's this going to mean for us as security professionals? Are we going to be involved in like logistics? And the answer is, to a certain extent, it's incredibly likely. Are we going to be involved in understanding who's trustworthy when it comes to battery manufacturing and the factory that the battery? What about if a battery manufacturer who we trust buys batteries from a third party? Well, your bill of materials just got more interesting. And so, on the whole, as we develop as a security maturity, as a mature security industry, the things that we look at are expanding beyond let's pen test that website to let's check the logistics of everything that comes into the company. Let's check the firmware and everything that comes into the company, the batteries, the hardware, the whatever. Let's check the software, maybe with a pen test, maybe with an exploitability scanner. Okay, maybe there's all sorts of aspects to this, not just in this one piece, but as the mindset changes and the perspective changes, I really think our industry is going to change as well. Anyway, just a thought. Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, that stuff's so complicated and scary. I mean, I was always, we had so many steps to go through at the bank when we wrote code because so many things were involved. And now it's nothing. And now it's like the giant octopus to end all octopi into every piece of everything, and how many libraries and Augustus de Morgan, as you always hear me say. Thank you, Josh. And finally, everybody loves steganography. It's fun to say, it's fun to do. And it was like the number one question I used to get in forensics class was like, are we going to cover steganography? And you're just like, oh my God, yes, we'll talk about it. But, it's a cool idea. And, basically the steganography we were talking about was hiding pictures inside of other pictures by using unused bits and pixels to, put this in there. And it is a very clever idea, and it's hard to detect, and probably people do it. But this particular story was about a different kind of steganography, which was basically using hidden Unicode characters to talk to AIs. Because, kind of like dogs can hear stuff you can't hear, and cats can see ghosts that you don't see. And, my cats were seeing some kind of ghost last night. I don't know what they were seeing, but we were all running for the doors. But I was like, save yourselves. But I mean, there's stuff like that. So it basically is a kind of steganography. So according to this research, in the test, they were testing a bunch of things, but they tested GPT-4o and Claude Opus. They said that those, along with Pilot and other ones, were able to see and process invisible words that didn't show up in browser windows. Okay, so this is like puny code and all this other kind of stuff, right? So they developed 2 proof of concept attacks earlier this year that were targeting Copilot, which is Microsoft's product. The attacks got Copilot by passing messages to Copilot that were invisible. They got Copilot to search a user's inbox for, good things, and then paste those good bits onto the end. It was appending them onto the ends of URLs so that they looked innocuous. So the URL just basically says, happyday.com / something, but it actually had a bunch of invisible Unicode attached to the end of it that did not get processed by the browser. But when that particular Unicode hit a server, it could be captured. And the example they were using was showing the sales value of something, and it was just attached to the end of the URL. Now, according to Microsoft, those attacks have been mitigated, and most of these have been mitigated according to the authors at the time of the report. But they called this whole thing ASCII2 smuggling. So if you hear that term, the links look identical, but the Unicode appended info is not displayed when you dump it in the decoder, you can see what it is. So Unicode has an ASCII2 code block. So they took all the ASCII2 code characters and put them into Unicode, because Unicode is huge compared to ASCII2. And they took all the ASCII characters and put them in there, but Unicode never really implemented this. The original implementation was that they were going to put a tag on it to show that it was English or Japanese or whatever. And then, unless those tags were there, it wasn't displayed. But the characters got added to Unicode, but the language tags got dropped. So code without a language tag, you don't see it. Now, Claude and Claude API was the most influenced, according to them, by the invisible text. And the researchers said that Anthropic, who developed Claude, basically said they didn't see it as a security issue. So I guess that means they're not going to do anything about it. So I don't know if it still works or not. Everybody's been real secretive about this. OpenAI and Azure both read and wrote tags as well, but they have now stopped without notice. So if you like this kind of stuff, you like crypto or you like these kind of hacks, it's a very interesting story to read. They have a lot of examples that you can try at home yourself. So it's a pretty fun story to take a look at if you have a chance. And that is the news for today. Thank you, Josh. And I will see you next time on the Security Weekly News.